Hello and welcome to the latest episode in Transform Finance with Michael Ryan. What I want to talk to you about today is a key trend that I've noticed in finance transformation over the course of the last 5 years, as evidenced by my experience interacting with clients. And that is that people are requesting program assurance at a far greater rate than they ever did in the past. In simple English, what is program assurance? Program assurance is a second opinion from another professional. Why has it become so prevalent over the course of the last 5 years? Largely because in terms of how businesses go out looking for professional services, they no longer go exclusively to one of the big four based on their size. They could go to the big four, of course. They could go beyond that into the big 10, shall we say. They could go for smaller boutique consultancies. They could develop their own in-house solutions and in-house designs. They could deploy an interim, or they could deploy a team of interims via one of the recruitment agencies or independently, such as myself. As a result of that, since so many more people can help you run a finance transformation program, it has led to this advantage almost of taking a second opinion. There's a far greater ability for you to get a second opinion than there ever was before. In the past, you paid reasonably high rates for one of the big four firms to tell you how to do this or to lead you through it or do it for you. And now you have a plethora of choices. And then by extension, you have a plethora of choices for a second opinion. Over the course of the last 5 years, I would reckon that 80% of my client work has been driven by program assurance. And although we throw around the term, people need to see in reality what did that actually translate into. Then it helps them decide whether program assurance is of benefit to them. So I noted this down when I was thinking about this yesterday. And I said that there was probably 6 instances in which a client engages me to perform program assurance or give them a second opinion. The first is always in relation to the business case or feasibility study for a transformation program. Due to the size and scope of these engagements, the client is going to be spending 7 figures and above, over the course or over the timeline of the project itself. So there are some major decisions that are made. And typically there are 3 major decisions that they get slightly uncomfortable with and want a second opinion and some form of reassurance on, or indeed formal challenge and change their minds. So within that business case feasibility study piece, what I find is they come to me for my opinion on 3 things. The first is the target operating model, which has been recommended to them. And in the case of large corporates, those target operating models are going to be something which is a stretch target for the existing organization. So it's going to be something along the lines of a captive shared service center, maybe a BPO, or maybe a center of excellence in, for example, reporting or purchase to pay or order to cash that the business would benefit from. In all instances, it involves most likely redundant staff, transition of work, and relocation of where the main finance service is provided from. So they're not decisions which are taken lightly. And I help clients decide whether in-house shared services, BPO, or some form of center of excellence is the best solution for them. The second instance with regards to the business case feasibility study is the ERP strategy. Now I'm going to come on to this in a bit more detail later on, so I'm not going to labor it now. So first of all, I get asked to check the target operating model proposed. Secondly, I get asked to check what the ERP system is that was selected. And finally, due to the size and scope of these engagements, I get asked to give a second opinion on the location. So invariably, when you create a new shared service center, you end up doing it in a new location as opposed to one of your existing locations. So we go through what's known as a location selection exercise, long list, 6 or 7 relevant cities, narrowed it down to 3, then down to 2, then make your decision. And these are tough decisions to make. I was talking to a client only the other day who's going through one, and the 3 options involved extended from one side of Europe to the other. And there are many variables in the equation. So it is always best when it comes to target operating model, ERP strategy, and location strategy to at least sense check with another professional what you're doing. I have, in all of the instances I've done this, and I think I've done this 4 times over the course of the last 5 years, I have changed the client's decision on one of those three factors. Not an easy thing to do. You need to know your stuff. You need to be armed with all of the information from the client. And you need to have a client which is open-minded to ending up with the best result for themselves. In other instances, I will copper fasten what the original proposal was and say, I've gone through it, sense checked it, and yes, I would have reached the same conclusion myself. What does this provide to a CFO? It provides reassurance is what it does. And more clients are seeking this. So that's the first one, which is a business case. And then people say to me, well, if we bring in a consulting team to do this, and maybe there's 5 or 6 of them on site, and they work through this for about 4 months, interacting with our staff, how long does it take you to give us a second opinion? Well, given that they have produced the first set of deliverables and the actual proposal for the client, we base the work on that. And then stakeholder interviews with the key players, and basically then layer on top of that our own experience of previous engagements. And that takes on average, I would say, 1/4 of the time that it took the original team to do. So whether it takes them 3 months or 4 months, it's going to take us a month or a couple of weeks, slightly beyond that, which is reasonable given that we're not starting from scratch. The second instance in which I get approached by clients is, let's just call it for the direction of travel. So in this instance, the client themselves, they don't usually deal with consultancies. They have decided that they're running the program in-house, and they have decided they're going to upgrade their system within the existing suite of packages that they have. They're not going for a new one. They know that they're going to use one of their existing finance locations where they've got a large headcount. And they basically want somebody to give them a run-through, second opinion challenge on what it is that they propose to do, because they're not used to looking at this through the lens of a consultant. They're typically one-day challenger workshops, and you lay out what it is you want to do, and I layer my experience against it and challenge you as to what you're doing. Whether that then leads to additional work or not, in some instances it does, not always. Some people just want me to come in, challenge them for a day, leave them with the thoughts, and they go away and they alter their own plans themselves. So that's 1 day direction of travel. The third one, which has come up more and more as well, is a stage gate review. So a typical finance transformation program has, depending upon which consultancy you pick, maybe 4, 5, or 6 stages to it. But typically it's assess, design, build, test, implement, and post-go live support. So those type of 6, any of those which to choose. And frequently what I find is that clients, as they go through something which will go on for 18 months and beyond, they start to get a little change fatigue halfway through the program. They start to get a little nervous because they've kind of lost touch with how this started. In some instances, there could be different staff now running the program, and there certainly could be different staff in the business as usual roles. It's not unusual for some of the major players to change during your finance transformation program lifecycle. And what they want to do is they want to take a pause at one of those phases, and they want somebody else to review where they're at through the lens of how I would have done it if I was running the program. The stage gate review and how long it takes depends upon the size of your program in the first instance. So the number of elements involved, are you changing the target operating model? Are you changing your ERP system to a completely new one as opposed to an upgrade from the existing one? And the degree of process change. So how mature was the organization in the first place? What's the step level of change we're aiming for? And generally, people come to me for a stage gate review, kind of around about they've finished build and tests, and they're like, we're about to now start to really seriously ramp up the change management piece. Could somebody assess where we are from the original organization design to now and to what's going to happen next? So that's a stage gate, and it typically takes a couple of weeks. The fourth one, which is an extension thereof, but comes right at the end before you go live, is a readiness assessment. And all of the major consultancies will offer you a readiness assessment. But it is a form of second opinion because it's not being done by your internal program team or by your own internal program director. It's been done by an outside force, looking at it and going, right, are you really clinically ready to go live? And what you're looking at there is people can get target fixated on the system. Is the system built? Is the system tested? but really you can touch and feel that. What I find people get most nervous about in the readiness assessment is whether the people are ready. So you're going from what your organization design was before, through go live, into what your organization design is going to be for the future. And people really just don't know how to manage the gap. How do you manage the transition? How do you manage out some staff while still ensuring that service delivery isn't adversely impacted? It's a challenge, and it's the part, in my opinion, which makes people the most nervous. So we conduct a readiness assessment, and we would conduct it possibly for a slightly longer degree than we would conduct a typical stage gate review. Again, how long it takes is dependent upon size and shape of the organization, number of heads impacted, number of sites, whether you're upgrading the system or picking a completely new one, etc., etc. That's the fourth one. Then I come to the one which happens on a frequent basis. I alluded to it when I explained to you that we needed to double check, or we do get asked to double check, the business case and the feasibility studies. And that's the ERP strategy. Now, in this instance, there's a couple of different approaches. The first is the client has already made their decision. They are upgrading their ERP system from version A to version B, but within the same package. And they just want you to go, right, in light of how the business is operating and how finance is set up and structured, are we okay with doing this? The second instance happens in which they have selected the ERP system, whether it's a new package or not, and it doesn't address all of the functionality that they have or that they require. And they require some other best of breed add-on solution to address this. An example could be revenue assurance. And what they want you to do is they have chosen the larger system, and they want you to put forward what the options are for the supporting system or the subsidiary system. That happens an awful lot in the purchase to pay process as well, where not all of the process is managed right the way through from order requisition through invoice receipt to match, etc., in the one system. There is invariably some other form of software in the equation. And we get asked to recommend what they should be. The third one is you're coming at this as a complete novice. So you've never gone through an RFP selection exercise to upgrade your ERP, select a new one, or stay within the existing package range. And you want our help to structure it. And we do that. We will come up with a long list of suppliers for you. We will come up with an options assessment framework. We will, if you haven't already done so, revisit your business requirements. And we will help you put that together so that you can send an RFP out to market. We will then help you downsize that down to 3, and eventually down to 2, and eventually your chosen preferred route. And the final one is you've picked the you've picked the ERP, and you require help finding a software integrator. So you require somebody else to help you implement it, even if you're doing the organizational change piece in-house yourself. So in essence, it's an RFP exercise again. And we do that, it's just around who's going to actually provide the support to enable you to roll out the system. Now, the final one, number 6, is actually one of the most interesting ones where people come to me looking for a second opinion, because they actually are most nervous, in my opinion, over the last 2 or 3 years with regards to this, due to changing legislation, particularly in the UK, where there is a requirement to know in more depth, or to have at least made reasonable endeavors to understand exactly the background of your employees, your suppliers, and your customers. And everybody focuses on the customer piece, to know your customer piece. But the supplier piece is going to take more and more center stage in all efforts to combat and avoid being defrauded. So the 6th and final area is that people ask me to do process compliance checks. And that actually in many instances involves us mapping the finance process in the first instance. And the 2 main areas that they focus on for this, where you can lose money, is obviously in the purchase to pay process, or in the order to cash process where you're not collecting it. So invariably, this will involve me performing some degree of high-level taxonomy, process mapping, and then a review of the individual processes themselves, as I explained in the 7-step approach I have to process analysis, so that you can assess the effectiveness and the efficiency of the process, but also its vulnerabilities. Could you actually break it? Where could you break it? Where is it exposed? It typically tends to be exposed with regards to access. So who's allowed to do what? We have 400 people in the business, and we allow all 400 people to do every single piece of functionality within the P2P process, even though they never use it, just because that's how we set up the system. We give everybody the ability to spend 10 grand on their corporate credit card. Even if we added that up across the 400 staff, we'd be leaving ourselves with quite a substantial exposure, and they never use it. But why should we leave the exposure there? There are many different ways in which your purchase to pay process can be defrauded, or your order to cash process can be corrupted, and you can end up not collecting the cash. And process compliance is what we do. On average, I say it takes about 3 months to perform effectively. The data gathering, the process mapping, the analysis, and then the stress testing is relatively time consuming unless you already have the process maps developed. And that's the process maps with metrics. A process map without a metric, it just has no context. It's practically meaningless. So that's the 6 things. So that trend has grown, as I said at the start, because there are a plethora of people who can provide a solution to you in the professional services business consulting space. Consequently, there are a plethora of them who could actually provide you with a second opinion, though it's not typically something that other people major. So in terms of what I do with finance transformation consulting, I major on assessment through to assurance. So I help you set up your finance transformation program for success, and my 9-step success framework is available in episode 2, right the way through to assurance. I give you a second opinion on what you're already doing. You may run the program yourself or have somebody else run the program for you. And what I am is I'm a sounding board, or I'm a mirror being held up against the progress that you're making to check whether there's another route, or you're potentially making a mistake. You're going down a route which is going to cost you at a later date. And one of the challenges with all of this is that the time frame over which a finance transformation program is delivered, as I said to you earlier, could be on average 18 months, probably a bit longer with a new system, and the size and shape of organizations if we change the target operating model to shared services, or indeed we BPO any of it. And consequently, as I said earlier, the people involved in the project are not the same from the start to the end, invariably. That can happen on the BAU front or on the project team front. And you can get a little bit of change fatigue, and you can lose the thread. You can lose the thread from the initial exam question, visioning what target operating model we're aiming for, and then we're in the nuts and bolts where the muck and bullets is flying as we come up to implementation, and that link is being probably at best frayed and tested, and you need somebody to come in and take stock, remind you of why you're doing it, remind you of the key things you're attempting to achieve, and essentially keep you laser focused on what's necessary to succeed. So there are the 6 instances, and I would say that it's a trend which is rising. I probably have experienced it beyond the 5 years, but I've certainly experienced it driving about 80% of my work over the course of the last 5 years. If you want to see some of those examples, you can check out the website, financetransformation.co.uk, in order to give a greater appreciation of some of the work that I've done. So we're 19 minutes into this. So that's the podcast with regards to program assurance. Just a general catch up down on top of that for the last few minutes that we have. So at this stage now, I have created 5 episodes with this of the podcast. I have created a separate website to house the podcast and the videos, which are being released through YouTube, which is just an example of, in the one place for you. So very, very simply, I own the domain name transformfinancewithmichaelryan.com, and you are welcome to go look it up, where you'll easily see a link through to, I've chosen Spotify for hosting the audio podcasts, and you'll see the thumbnails for the video podcast, which is what we're recording at the moment. And they'll all be in one place. My next intention is to take I think it's roughly 40 editions of the newsletter that I've written, and provide copies of them within that website as well, so that all of the information whereby we're hopefully, I would hope so, teaching you something in terms of how to approach a finance transformation program is in the one place for you, and it's easy to remember. It's basically Transform Finance with Michael Ryan. And that is what program assurance is all about. It's about giving you a second opinion, and indeed providing you with a reservoir of materials you can reference from time to time. As you listen to the podcasts and you have questions, you are welcome to DM me on LinkedIn. You are welcome to reach out to me if you have my email address with any specific requests. If you have any particular topics that you want me to cover, by all means, send them through as well. So that's where we're at the moment. I'm very happy with the progress so far. I hope you are too. And I'm not going to keep you any longer today. That's just going to roughly take us up to about 21 minutes. In a nutshell, just to recap, program assurance is one of the key trends I've seen in finance transformation over the last 5 years. The 6 instances in which I see it are the business case feasibility stage, the direction of travel, which is a 1-day challenger session with me, stage gate review, which could take 2 to 3 weeks, readiness assessment, which could also take 2 to 3 weeks, ERP strategy, whether you've made the decision or whether you're starting from scratch, or you require a best of breed add-on to an existing ERP solution, and process compliance, particularly in the areas of purchase to pay and order to cash within the UK with regards to recent legislation passed last October. And the only thing that I'll leave you with, the final thought, is that in order to address all 6 of those, it doesn't matter what sector you're in. These are consulting skills applied to helping you make a decision. Review the options process that you've gone through and made a decision, challenge your decision. These are all consulting skills. No sector experience is required. Those 6 things can be applied in any of them. And they have been applied right across the board, from financial services to FMCG to pharma and into the public sector. So if that's of any interest to you, feel free to reach out. And I'm going to call a halt at just coming up to 22 minutes. I hope you enjoy the podcast. All the best, Michael.